Picture this: a brilliant software engineer named Vera Martinez watched her entire company crumble into bankruptcy within 6 months. The reason? Her boss canceled a $20,000 cybersecurity training program she desperately tried to implement. What he didn't know was that Vera had discovered something that would make that training cost look like pocket change. This is the story of how one woman's rejected proposal became the catalyst for the most spectacular corporate downfall in tech history. Vera Martinez had that Monday morning feeling in her gut, the kind that whispers something's about to go sideways. She clutched her Starbucks Pike Place roast tighter as she walked into Pinnacle Systems, the mid-sized software company where she'd been the lead cybersecurity engineer for 3 years. The Denver-based firm specialized in financial software for credit unions, and Vera had built their security infrastructure from the ground up. She was proud of her work, maybe too proud. That's probably why she'd spent her weekend crafting the perfect presentation for today's budget meeting. "Morning, Vera," chirped Jessica from accounting, her voice artificially bright. "Ready for the big presentation?" Vera nodded, patting her laptop bag. Inside was a PowerPoint that could save the company, or at least, that's what she believed. The $20,000 Advanced Threat Detection Training Program wasn't just another line item. It was insurance against the digital warfare she saw coming. Her boss, Marcus Thornfield, had been resistant to cybersecurity investments lately. The 40-something executive with his perfectly styled silver hair and expensive Armani suits preferred flashy marketing campaigns over invisible security measures. "If customers can't see it, why spend on it?" was his favorite phrase. But Vera had ammunition today. 3 weeks ago, she discovered unusual network activity, probing attempts that looked sophisticated. Too sophisticated for random hackers. She documented everything, created detailed reports, and built an ironclad case for why they needed this training immediately. The conference room was already buzzing when she arrived. Marcus sat at the head of the mahogany table, scrolling through his iPhone while the quarterly numbers flashed on the wall-mounted screen. Sarah Chun from marketing was there, along with Tom Bradley from sales, and the entire executive team. "All right, people," Marcus announced, finally looking up. "Let's make this quick. We've got the quarterly review with the board next week, and I want our budget locked down." Vera's palms were sweating, but she stood up confidently. This was her moment. "I'll start with cybersecurity," she began, clicking to her first slide. "We're facing an evolving threat landscape, and I've identified some concerning patterns in our network traffic that require immediate attention." Marcus's expression was already shifting to that familiar look of polite boredom. But Vera pressed on, knowing what she discovered could change everything. What she didn't know was that her presentation was about to trigger a chain of events that would expose the biggest secret in Pinnacle Systems history. $20,000? Marcus's voice cut through the conference room like a blade. He'd been scrolling through his phone for most of Vera's presentation, but that number got his attention fast. Vera straightened her shoulders. "Yes, but Marcus, if you look at slide 7, you'll see the network anomalies I've detected. These aren't random attacks. Someone's systematically probing our—" "Vera, sweetheart," Marcus interrupted, using that condescending tone that made her skin crawl. "I appreciate your enthusiasm for cybersecurity theater, but 20 grand for a training program? That's 2 months of marketing budget." Sarah Chun nodded eagerly from across the table. "We could launch an entire social media campaign with that money. Something customers can actually see." Tom Bradley chimed in, "Plus, we haven't had any actual security incidents. Why fix what isn't broken?" Vera felt her presentation crumbling, but she had to try one more approach. "Look, I've been tracking these intrusion attempts for 3 weeks. The patterns suggest we're wasting time on theoretical problems," Marcus said, standing up. "Motion to reject the cybersecurity training budget. All in favor?" 5 hands shot up around the table. Vera watched in stunned silence as her months of preparation got dismissed in under 30 seconds. "But Marcus," she said, her voice barely steady, "at least let me finish explaining what I found in the network logs. There's something you all need to know about." "Meeting's over, Vera. Maybe spend less time looking for problems that don't exist and more time on actual productivity." Marcus was already packing up his leather portfolio. "Sarah, I want to see those marketing campaign proposals by Thursday." As the room emptied, Vera sat alone staring at her laptop screen. The slide she never got to show was still there, the one titled Critical Discovery, Unauthorized Administrative Access Detected. She'd found something 3 days ago while investigating those network anomalies. Something that made the $20,000 training look like a bargain. Hidden deep in the system logs was evidence of someone with administrative privileges accessing client financial data after hours. The timestamps showed a pattern: every Friday night, massive data transfers to an external server. Vera had been planning to reveal this discovery during her presentation, to show why immediate security training was crucial. But Marcus had cut her off before she could get there. Now, sitting in the empty conference room, she faced a choice. She could file a formal incident report through proper channels, which would go straight to Marcus, who'd already proven he didn't care about security concerns. Or she could do some investigating on her own first. She thought about her mortgage payment, her job security, her reputation in the company. Then she thought about the 50,000 credit union members whose financial data might be at risk. Vera closed her laptop and made her decision. If Marcus wouldn't listen to her official presentation, maybe she'd have to find another way to get his attention. She had no idea that her next move would uncover a conspiracy that went all the way to the top, and that Marcus himself might be the one behind those suspicious data transfers. That night, Vera sat in her Honda Civic in the Pinnacle Systems parking lot, watching the last of her co-workers leave. The Colorado winter wind rattled her windows as she waited for the building to go completely dark. At 9:47 p.m., she finally saw what she was looking for, a single light still glowing on the executive floor. Someone was working late. Or at least, someone wanted it to look that way. She badged into the building, her footsteps echoing in the empty lobby. The security guard, Frank, was doing his rounds on the second floor. She could hear his keys jingling from the stairwell. Perfect timing. Vera made her way to her cubicle and fired up her workstation. If she was going to investigate these data transfers, she needed to be smart about it. She couldn't access the executive systems directly without raising red flags, but she could trace the network traffic patterns from her own security monitoring tools. The coffee maker gurgled to life as she started her dig. She'd brought a thermos of her homemade chili and some crackers. This was going to be a long night. 2 hours in, she hit pay dirt. The data transfers weren't random, they followed a precise schedule. Every Friday at 11:47 p.m., someone with administrative access was copying entire client databases to an external server registered to a company called Mountain Vista Consulting, LLC. Vera's fingers flew across the keyboard as she traced the digital breadcrumbs. Mountain Vista Consulting wasn't just any company, it was incorporated in Delaware 3 months ago, with a business address that looked suspiciously like a mailbox service. But here's where it got interesting: the person initiating these transfers was logging in with Marcus's executive credentials. "That son of a bitch," she whispered to her empty cubicle. Her phone buzzed with an Instagram notification, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. It was just her sister posting pictures from her vacation in Cancun, but the interruption made Vera realize something crucial. She'd been so focused on the technical evidence that she hadn't considered the paper trail. She pulled up the corporate directory and cross-referenced the incorporation date of Mountain Vista Consulting with Pinnacle's recent executive decisions. The timeline was damning. Marcus had rejected her cybersecurity budget the same week he'd quietly approved a consulting contract with an unnamed third party. A consulting contract worth exactly $2.3 million over 6 months. The same amount that had been mysteriously transferring out of client accounts, according to her network analysis. Vera's hands were shaking as she screenshot the evidence. Marcus wasn't just stealing data, he was embezzling millions of dollars in client funds and using his own administrative access to cover his tracks. The cybersecurity training she'd proposed would have included monitoring tools that would have caught him immediately. No wonder he'd shut down her presentation so aggressively. She was about to save her findings when she heard something that made her blood run cold: the ding of the executive elevator, followed by footsteps in the hallway above. Someone else was in the building. Someone who had access to the executive floor at midnight on a Tuesday. Vera quickly minimized her windows and grabbed her phone. She had enough evidence to expose Marcus, but first she needed to get out of there without being discovered. As she gathered her things, she realized she'd stumbled onto something much bigger than simple embezzlement. The question was, how many people at Pinnacle Systems were involved in this conspiracy? Wednesday morning hit Vera like a freight train. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with evidence and implications. Over her usual breakfast of scrambled eggs and wheat toast, she mapped out her strategy. She had the smoking gun, but she needed to be strategic about how she used it. Walking into Pinnacle Systems felt different now. Every executive she passed in the hallway could be complicit. Every friendly smile from accounting might be hiding something. When Jessica waved her usual cheery good morning, Vera wondered if she was part of it too. Marcus was already in his corner office, door open, laughing loudly into his phone. Probably planning his next embezzlement, Vera thought bitterly. She needed to get him to reveal more before she made her move. "Hey Marcus," she said, knocking on his doorframe. "Got a minute?" He ended his call and gestured for her to sit. "What's up, Vera? Still upset about yesterday's budget decision?" She forced a smile. "Actually, I wanted to apologize. You were right, I was probably being paranoid about those network anomalies. Maybe I should focus more on actual productivity, like you said." Marcus's expression brightened. "Now that's what I like to hear. See, this is why I value your practical thinking." "In fact," Vera continued, playing her part perfectly, "I was wondering if you could help me understand our data management procedures better. I noticed some large file transfers happening after hours, but I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation." She watched Marcus's face carefully. For just a split second, his confident smile flickered. "File transfers? What kind of file transfers?" "Oh, probably just automated backups or something. I saw some activity going to a company called Mountain Vista Consulting. I figured you'd know since you handle all the executive-level partnerships." The color drained from Marcus's face, but he recovered quickly. "Right, yes. Mountain Vista. They're handling some legacy data migration for us. Very routine stuff. Nothing you need to worry about." Vera nodded enthusiastically. "That makes perfect sense. I feel so silly for getting concerned. Hey, would it be possible to get some documentation on that project? Just so I can update my security protocols to make sure I'm not flagging legitimate business activities." "Documentation." Marcus's voice was tight now. "Well, that's all handled at the executive level. Confidential client data, you understand. Maybe just focus on your regular security monitoring for now." "Of course," Vera agreed. "Though I have to ask, shouldn't a project involving client data migration require some cybersecurity oversight? Especially with all the new regulations." Marcus stood up abruptly. "Vera, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but some things are above your pay grade. The Mountain Vista project is handled by people with the appropriate clearance levels." There it was, confirmation that he was actively managing the embezzlement scheme, not just enabling it. Vera had what she needed, but she decided to push just a little further. "You're absolutely right," she said. "I just want to make sure I'm doing my job properly. Should I include the Mountain Vista transfers in my monthly security report to the board?" Marcus went completely still. "No. Absolutely not. That project is classified at the executive level. Including it in your report would violate client confidentiality agreements." Vera stood up, maintaining her innocent expression. "Got it. Thanks for clarifying, Marcus. I'll make sure to exclude any mention of Mountain Vista from my reports." As she walked back to her cubicle, Vera's heart was pounding. She'd gotten Marcus to confirm not only that he knew about the transfers, but that he was actively trying to hide them from the board of directors. Now she had everything she needed to bring down his entire operation. But first, she needed to make sure she had backup copies of all her evidence stored somewhere Marcus couldn't reach. What she didn't know was that Marcus had already started making calls to ensure Vera Martinez would never get the chance to expose him. Thursday morning, Vera arrived at Pinnacle Systems to find her keycard wouldn't work. She stood at the main entrance, swiping her badge over and over while other employees streamed past her into the building. "Having trouble, Vera?" It was Marcus, appearing behind her with that practiced executive smile. "I was hoping to catch you before you got upstairs." Her stomach dropped. "My badge seems to be malfunctioning." "Actually, we need to talk. Conference room B is available." It wasn't really a request. Vera followed him into the small meeting room, her mind racing. Had he figured out what she'd discovered? She'd been so careful, but maybe. "Vera, this is difficult for me," Marcus began, settling into his chair with theatrical concern. It's come to my attention that you've been accessing company systems outside of normal business hours. Unauthorized network monitoring, reviewing confidential files. I'm the cybersecurity engineer, Vera said carefully. Network monitoring is literally my job description. Not executive-level financial data. Not client account information. Marcus opened a manila folder. We've had to conduct a security audit based on some concerning reports about your recent activities. Vera felt the walls closing in, but she kept her voice steady. What kind of reports? Well, for starters, Frank the security guard mentioned seeing you in the building at unusual hours. And our IT logs show extensive database queries from your workstation that fall well outside your authorized access levels. This was it. Marcus was making his move to discredit her before she could expose him. But two could play that game. Marcus, I think there's been a misunderstanding, she said. I was investigating potential security breaches. In fact, I found evidence of unauthorized data transfers that I believe require immediate attention. His expression hardened. Vera, I'm going to stop you right there. Making false accusations against the company is a serious matter. Especially when those accusations might be an attempt to cover up your own unauthorized activities. False accusations? Vera's voice rose despite her effort to stay calm. I have documentation of millions of dollars being transferred to an external company that doesn't even. Enough. Marcus's mask finally slipped, revealing something cold underneath. Vera, effective immediately, you're being placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation into your conduct. Your access to all Pinnacle Systems resources is revoked. He slid a document across the table. This is a cease and desist letter regarding any discussion of confidential company information. Sign it, and we can handle this quietly. Refuse, and we'll have to involve legal action for corporate espionage. Vera stared at the paper, her hands trembling with rage. Corporate espionage? For doing my job. For exceeding your authority and making wild allegations against senior management, Marcus corrected. Sign the document, Vera. Don't make this harder than it has to be. She picked up the pen, looked at Marcus's confident expression, and realized he'd made one crucial mistake. He assumed she'd be intimidated into silence. He assumed she'd prioritize her own job security over doing what was right. He was wrong. I'll need to have my lawyer review this first, she said, standing up without signing anything. Marcus's confident expression flickered. Vera, I'd strongly advise you to sign this now. The alternative could be very unpleasant for your career prospects. Are you threatening me, Marcus? I'm trying to help you avoid making a mistake you'll regret. Vera tucked the unsigned document into her purse. I'll be in touch. As she walked out of Pinnacle Systems for what might be the last time, Vera realized Marcus had just made the biggest tactical error of his criminal career. By trying to silence her, he'd confirmed everything she suspected and given her the motivation she needed to take him down completely. She had 72 hours before the cease and desist became legally binding. Time to make those hours count. Six months later, Vera Martinez sat in the law offices of Patterson, Chen and Associates, signing the final settlement documents. The class action lawsuit against Pinnacle Systems had resulted in a $47 million judgment, the largest cybersecurity-related settlement in Colorado history. Congratulations, Ms. Martinez, said attorney Jennifer Chun, sliding the papers across the mahogany conference table. Your whistleblower compensation comes to $4.7 million. Not bad for a $20,000 training program that never happened. Vera smiled, thinking about the irony. Marcus had tried to save money by canceling her cybersecurity training, and it had cost him everything. The Denver Business Journal article had triggered an avalanche of investigations. Within weeks, the FBI had uncovered the full scope of Marcus's embezzlement scheme, $8.3 million stolen from 17 different credit unions over 8 months. The scheme was so sophisticated that Marcus had been planning it for over a year, carefully positioning himself to override security protocols when needed. But that was just the beginning of Pinnacle Systems' problems. When the story broke, every single client immediately canceled their contracts. The credit unions filed lawsuits for negligence and data breach violations. The Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies revoked their financial services license. And the IRS discovered that Marcus had been hiding his stolen money in offshore accounts, adding tax evasion to his growing list of federal charges. What happened to Marcus? Vera asked, though she already knew the answer. Sentenced to 12 years in federal prison yesterday, Jennifer replied. Turns out the FBI found evidence linking him to similar schemes at his previous 2 employers. He's looking at 23 federal charges total. Vera nodded. Marcus Thornfield, who had once dismissed her cybersecurity expertise as theater, was now the star of his own very real criminal drama. And the company? Bankrupt. They're liquidating assets next month. Jennifer gathered her papers. Turns out that when you lose every client, face $47 million in legal judgments, and have your executives arrested for embezzlement, it's hard to stay in business. As Vera walked out of the law office into the Colorado sunshine, she thought about the lesson Marcus had learned too late. Cybersecurity isn't just about protecting against external threats. Sometimes the biggest threat is the person who thinks they're smart enough to defeat the system from the inside. Her phone buzzed with a text from her new employer, a Denver-based cybersecurity firm that had recruited her after reading about her investigative work in the Business Journal. Welcome to your first day as Chief Security Officer. Looking forward to your insights on our new $50,000 threat detection training program. Vera laughed out loud, causing a passing businessman to give her a strange look. Marcus had cancelled her $20,000 training program to protect his criminal enterprise. Now she was implementing a $50,000 program designed to catch people exactly like him. She'd started this journey as a cybersecurity engineer whose boss wouldn't listen to her warnings. She was ending it as a millionaire whistleblower whose testimony had brought down an entire company and sent a white-collar criminal to federal prison. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's being absolutely, completely right. And sometimes, when someone cancels your $20,000 training program, the universe finds a way to make them pay $47 million for that decision. Marcus Thornfield had taught Vera an important lesson about corporate power dynamics. Now, from his federal prison cell, he was learning an even more important lesson about the consequences of underestimating the people who keep you safe. The $20,000 training program that never happened had become the most expensive mistake in Pinnacle Systems history. And Vera Martinez? She was just getting started.